Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the first digital panel of 2021. Today's webinar is titled Qualitative Research Careers Outside of Academia. This panel is intended to provide students with an overview of how their qualitative research experience can best be leveraged into postgraduate career options. But before we get into the content, I would like to acknowledge, make a land acknowledgement. The Canadian Sociological Students' Concerns Subcommittee of the CSA wishes to situate its presence in the as an uninvited guest on the traditional territories of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people across so-called Canada. This acknowledgement recognizes the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous nations and their territories that the CSA and its constituents work to live on. As a committee and organization, we strive to understand our role within Canada's ongoing settler colonial project that subjects Indigenous peoples to dispossession and genocide. We recognize our participation and complacency in colonial modalities and acknowledge systems that are committed to decolonial praxis that centers and affirms the contributions of Indigenous elders and scholars in the field of sociology. Before we get started, I should let everyone know that the audience members are muted to limit background noise. If you have any questions during the panel, we encourage you to submit those through the Q&A function, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. Your questions will be visible to all attendees and panelists and audience members. You can also upvote questions to prioritize them. The panelists will address questions during the open Q&A period following the discussion. So maybe you'd like to get to know a bit about us on the Sociology Students Sub-Concerns Committee. So my name is Nicole Millette, and I am the Western Rep for the CSA Students Sub-Concerns Committee. Our subcommittee also includes our Chair and Central Rep, Awish Islam, Eastern Rep, Finbar Hefferon, and our Cross-Appointment Equity Subcommittee Rep, Carrietta Thomas. Our committee is also supported by the work of volunteers, Molly Harper and Kieran Magnot. And of course, this session would not be possible without the Canadian Sociological Association. So we would like to thank the CSA for sponsoring this initiative. And a huge thank you to Sherry Fox, the Executive Director of the CSA, for working with us to plan and organize this series. We'd also like to thank everyone in the audience who submitted feedback when registering for this panel. Your questions and comments were used to guide today's discussion, so thank you so much. Today, we're very fortunate to be joined by three wonderful panelists. Our first panelist is Dr. Heather Holroyd. Dr. Holroyd is the Community-Based Research Coordinator at the UBC Learning Exchange, where she supports research and knowledge exchange related to connections between members of the UBC community and residents and organizations of an inner-city neighborhood in Vancouver, Canada. Prior to taking this position in 2018, Heather worked in a policy-focused role as a research associate at the Social Research and Demonstration Corporation and as the Evaluation and Community-Based Research Coordinator at Pacific AIDS Network. Beyond research and evaluation, Heather is passionate about nonprofit governance and enjoys time with her partner and her dog, Stanley. Our next panelist is Dr. Judith Mintz. Dr. Mintz holds a PhD in Gender and Women's Studies from York University in Toronto and is a research and program evaluator for Native Children and Family Services Toronto. She is also an instructor within York University's Academic Bridging for Women program. Visiting scholar with York University City Institute, Dr. Mintz has published with Global Labor Research Center, Demeter's Press, Athabasca University Press, and Canadian Women's Studies. Her research focuses on decolonial, intergenerational trauma, interculturalism, allyship, and the intersections of the body to improve equity, inclusion, and well-being. She's also the mother of two daughters. So thank you, Judith, for joining us. Our third panelist is Meghan Miller. She is a research consultant with MQO Research Atlantic Canada's leading market insights company and graduate of the University of Western Ontario with a master's degree in sociology. With a strong background in both academia and industry, Meghan approaches social research with an eye toward participant experience on the micro level and a broader insights into the macro level. Meghan leaps at any opportunity to share her enthusiasm for research and how it can tell us about the world in which we live in. Born and raised on the East Coast, she is currently living in beautiful Halifax, Nova Scotia. And our final panelist is Allison Laing. Allison is a research coordinator at the British Columbia Centre on Substance Use and is a PhD student in the Department of Sociology at the University of British Columbia. Her research centers on economic participation and financial management practices among marginalized people who use drugs, including informal credit structures within social networks and alternative financial service use, and how these practices impact drug use patterns, social connections, institutional engagement, and exposure to risk. Before returning to academia, Allison worked for many years with people who use drugs in housing and harm reduction service provision and community-based research using both qualitative and quantitative methods. Outside of work, she enjoys rain-soaked hikes in the mountains and trivia nights on Zoom. Thank you all for taking part in this panel. Just before we start our discussion, I would like to give our panelists the opportunity to give a brief description of how you found yourself in the current work role that you have, focusing on the pathway that you took from academia into the job market. So I have a very strong suspicion that some of the participants here would like to learn how you navigated that road from academia into the workforce. So maybe starting with Meghan, if you can let us know how you made that transition. Hi, everyone. You're muted.
That's a very typical Zoom thing to be doing. Thank you so much, Nicole, for the introduction. Very, very excited to be here this evening. So I guess my background is in sociology at Western. I completed my master's sort of toward the tail end of 2018. And I kind of started to explore, okay, what am I going to do with this? And I was really, really fortunate to have some mentors who kind of pointed me in the direction of market research and working for professional research firms, kind of saying, you know, have you thought about this? Is this something that you would be interested in using your research skills in this kind of area? And so I was really fortunate to have the opportunity to work on a contract basis for a research firm for a number of months, and then kind of made the decision to move into that field full time, came on with MQO Research late 2019, and I've been super happy to be working there ever since. And MQO, we do a huge variety of different types of research, both qualitative and quantitative. Labor market studies, needs assessment studies and feasibility studies, as well as public opinion polling, client satisfaction surveys, all kinds of really interesting things. And there is a lot of qualitative research that we do and a lot of really interesting and dynamic ways to use that qualitative research. So, I get to do a lot of in-depth interviewing. I get to do a lot of, we do a lot of focus group moderation, community engagement sessions. Recently, we've been doing online bulletin boards in the time of COVID. As I said, there are a lot of really exciting ways to use qualitative research and those skills kind of in the market research industry.
Excellent. Well, we're looking forward to unpacking some of those skills that you've developed. Next, Heather, would you like to speak to how you transitioned out of academia and into the job market?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. It's such a pleasure to join you all here today. I'm coming to you from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh in East Vancouver. So I finished my PhD at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver in 2016. At that time, I was working as a graduate research assistant at the UBC Learning Exchange, which is the University of British Columbia, Vancouver's community engagement initiative in Vancouver's downtown east side. So that's an inner city neighborhood for those of you who are not so familiar with Vancouver. So I've kind of come full circle into my role that I'm in now. I was at a variety of different other organizations that I'd be happy to chat about during the discussion. But when this position was posted as a pilot role, actually it was only posted as a 6-month pilot position in October 2018, I jumped on the chance to go back to the UBC Learning Exchange and work there. And so I kind of took a leap and I feel fortunate that we're now going into the 3rd year of this role. So
that's really exciting. And it's nice to hear that you were able to draw on some of those experiences that you had during grad school to come back and help you out in post-grad work.
Definitely.
Judith, if you would like to to explain how you transitioned into some of the work that you're doing now as well.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm zooming in from Toronto, also known as the Treaty of the Toronto Purchase, and which is the surrender of the lands from the Mississaugas as a new credit. For me, my journey was a little bit torturous. I finished my PhD at the end of 2018. And I have been doing a lot of ethnographic methodologies for my dissertation. And while I was finishing up, I had been thinking about doing commercial ethnographic work, which gets translated as market research. I had interviewed for a job in doing market research, and I thought that I was going to do it. And in the winter of 2019, I did have a contract doing some market research stuff. It was kind of fun. I was doing work with mothers, mostly mothers, about food and how they wanted to feed their kids for an organic veggie company. That was okay, but it was just really a gig. So by this summer, I was out of work again. I was doing a little bit of contract teaching, which was wonderful, in the Academic Bridging for Women program at York. Any folks out there from York? Holla. And then I didn't know what was going to happen. And I was trying to network. I was connecting with post-PhD networking groups. I was learning about different things you can do, figure about what kinds of transferable skills you should be capitalizing on, and, playing around with what are the jobs that interest me. And so I was really thinking about how I can kind of crystallize the skills so that they transfer outside of academia. One of my friends said to me, like a month or so after I defended, she said, the first thing I did was I started to let go of my PhD. Well, of course, that thought horrified me. And it's really painful, right? Like where we spend all this time like formulating identities as academics. And I don't know, I still haven't let go. So I networked myself into the position I am in right now. I actually had one other contract, which ended up being really weird and toxic with a startup guy who didn't know what he was doing. And that lasted like 2 or 3 months before I begged myself out of it. And now where I am at with Native Child and Family Services of Toronto, I have to say it's a dream job, and I'm doing like qualitative research interviews, and I'm doing literature reviews and environmental scans on all things urban Indigenous in Toronto. And because of my background as a gender studies scholar and my master's in Canadian and Indigenous studies, it makes a lot of sense to be kind of integrating my skills here, looking at all sorts of topics in the child welfare space and in homelessness spaces, and also thinking about healing and land. So it's a lot of fun and really, really interesting interpersonal work. So I am really happy, and I kind of networked myself into this position.
Great. And there was a few points in there that hopefully we can draw out to conversations around networking. Also, how do we hold on to this idea around our academic identity when we transition out of academia and into maybe more private or NGO settings? How would you use those degrees? And then also about what are some of the pitfalls and the benefits of work? So thanks for bringing those things up. And let's move on to Allison. How did you transition into some of the work that you're doing too, even though now you've gone back to school?
Yeah, my transition has been back to academia from many years, decades actually, of being out of academia. So that identity of the academic that you were speaking of, Judith, I have fought hard to put that mantle on. And so it also kind of makes me feel a bit like an interloper as well on this panel, because I am so involved in academic currently, but also the work that I have done in qualitative work and also quantitative work has been academic adjacent, if you will. And so I'm sort of doing it. I'm the picture of the person who's doing it all backwards, as my mother would say. Yeah, so I worked for, well, you already heard this because of the introduction that Nicole read out, which was, very grad student, I'm realizing, compared to you guys as well, which is funny, defining myself by my research interests. But I worked in community in the downtown east side, which is the inner city in Vancouver. Sounds very similar to what Heather has been doing and also what you've been doing, Judith. And so I was working in service provision and then moved on to a lot of public health, randomized control trial type, quantitative-based, public healthy kind of research, and really was drawn to the qualitative work because it kind of filled in those gaps. It filled in those spaces between the numbers. It was more explanatory rather than exploratory qualitative research that I was engaged in, but it felt like a really good fit. And I really enjoyed that kind of connecting, that interpersonal element that other people have spoken to. Yeah, I think that might cover everything. I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen after I leave this academic space. I've got a few years to think about it and torture myself with it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing what other people on the panel have to say and take their advice. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Allison. So I'm now going to open it up to questions where I won't go one by one. You can just answer based on who would like to address it first. So the first question is, what are some of the benefits and challenges of transitioning out of academia and into your current role? So whoever would like to go first, just you can unmute yourself. Thanks,
I can go first. Thanks, Nicole. So I did some reflecting on this question before joining the panel. And so kind of picking up a little bit on my introduction, I work at the UBC Learning Exchange. We're the university's community engagement initiative in the downtown east side. And so my role really focuses on brokering connections between organizations and neighborhood residents and our campus community. So students, staff, faculty. And so the benefits of my role are that I get to work with and learn from a range of diverse groups with a range of diverse life experiences and perspectives, and try to foster connections between those different groups to kind of have mutually beneficial and ethical engagement and relationships. So that's obviously a beautiful thing. And, just the opportunity to learn every day from people is like, I can't even explain to you what that's like. It's just so wonderful. And then our own internal team, we're a pretty small team at the Learning Exchange. We have about 12 people on staff, and then we're supported at any given time by 9 to 12 students. So undergraduate students and graduate students in volunteer roles, work-learn positions, co-op positions, and GRA positions. So again, a really great opportunity to learn from students as well. And our team is really wonderful. They come from a variety of backgrounds with different skills. We all have a shared value. So one of the reasons why I love this work so much is that it is meaningful. Like I do feel like I get the opportunity in my role to use the skills that I gained during graduate school to make a positive impact. And I'm happy to talk about the projects that I work on, but that's not the purpose of today's panel. So I'll leave that for the discussion if people are interested. But the challenges are exactly the same things as the benefits. Working between diverse groups and trying to bridge those capacities. A lot of my time is just spent translating across a range of expertise and finding ways for people to work together in productive ways from very different situations and from very different levels of privilege, equitability, and just opportunity. And so that I think is some of the challenges that we face in the work that we do.
Thanks, Heather. And I think that this is a really important point, that sometimes in academia, these challenges that are faced by people working outside of the university setting are very different. thinking about how to translate knowledge and incorporate different perspectives is not always something that's done by professors and academics. They get to work in a bit more of a contained setting. Does anybody else want to speak to the benefits or challenges that they've experienced in transitioning?
I'd love to jump off of that, actually, because it speaks to a lot of the things that kind of in a different way that I wanted to bring up about, you know, the benefits and challenges of working in sort of the market research industry. So, you know, the benefits are that I'm always learning something new. It's never a dull moment. You know, we do not only just a lot of different types of research, but we do research across so many different industries, contexts, public, private. So I worked on projects in the construction industry, aquaculture, healthcare, you know, for the government, public opinion polling on, you know, hot topic events. And I have learned so much about so many things in the time that I've been working with MQO, just because I get to have my fingers in all kinds of different topics. So it's never a dull moment. And I always get, in terms of qualitative work too, because a lot of those involve things like in-depth interviewing with people on the ground in different industries or within organizations who are experiencing challenges or any kind of thing that the research aims to address. I get to talk to so many different people that I'd normally never encounter. So having like these in-depth conversations, doing 20 interviews on this given topic and really getting to engage with people super closely is really, really rewarding. In terms of challenges though, it's a challenge in the sense that it's something that I had to adapt to. It's never a dull moment in the sense that the environment tends to be quite fast paced. So the timelines are a little bit shorter than what I was used to in academia. And so not only are you adapting to projects kind of having a life cycle of a couple of months, but also making sure that you're working on multiple different projects at the same time too. So it's like, you know, that you have, you know, X amount of time to get this facet of the research done, kind of managing that and working on a skill set that allows me to think with a little bit more agility and work smarter, I guess is what I'm getting at, just to kind of adapt to the requirements of delivering really quality research within the timelines that that are required, as I said. But yeah, that was something that I think I had to kind of learn the ropes of when I first got into this type of work. But I think it's super rewarding to kind of get to learn about so many different kinds of things.
Great, thanks, Meghan. Allison or Judith, do you have anything that you want to add to those conversations?
I can say one thing I have to say about leaving academia. Well, I still have one foot in the door because I've got a couple of articles that I'm a book chapter that's coming out in a textbook with soon, and another article I'm currently revising. But I love not having to be in that siloed academic space. Like it's, you know, the grad student space, that kind of precariousness of sessional teaching. I'm really glad to not have to do that anymore. I like being able to close my computer and let work go, actually. Like, you know, as grad students, we are made to feel like our value is contingent on our ability to be working 24/7 and answering emails and always having like kind of crappy boundaries. And we're expected to do that. And that's kind of like, you know, what other like volunteer work should you do? Well, I mean, I'm of course like having you know, work that you love, that you're really interested in doing, so that you don't mind looking at an email on the weekend is great. But it's really lovely to be able to say, I'm done. I'm not looking at my email. And I actually have, like, since we're all working from home, and that was the funny thing is, I was 3 weeks working at Native Child before COVID. So I was like, yes, I'm in an office. This is so great. I'm going to work every day. And then I'm at home. Well, back where I started. This is fantastic. But one thing I did was I made sure I have my work laptop and I have my personal laptop. So on the weekends, I don't open my work laptop. It's amazing. So then on the weekend, if I want to look at a writing project, I can, and I don't have my work stuff coming up. So those boundaries are really nice to be able to have. Mm-hmm.
When you said that, I noticed a lot of people on the panel just smiling and nodding along. The idea of boundaries sounds great right now.
Mm-hmm.
Allison, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, what are boundaries? Can you just clarify that? I'm kidding. I used to have them. They disintegrated. But I feel like it'll be like riding a bicycle. I'll be able to get right back into asserting those boundaries again after all this is over. Yeah. Yeah, I have to keep reminding myself that weekends don't exist anymore. I don't have much to add to this particularly, except that I'm also, working toward the eventuality of doing dissertation research. And so COVID is a huge challenge, of course, especially when you're working with vulnerable populations. You have to be very conscious of not being a super spreader event and all the ethics concerns, and on top of everything else that's happening. Yeah, so just trying to navigate, being flexible to be able to navigate those ever-changing situations and circumstances, and being a responsible citizen in the midst of all of your own very pressing needs and those deadlines and everything else like that. Like, that's definitely something that's top of mind, shall we say. Not a challenge, because I don't think it's new for me, but it's definitely top of mind. Yeah, that's all I'll say, because I haven't transitioned out yet. So there you go.
I appreciate the perspective that you're giving of working in it while also being in academia. I think that it's a really unique point that I think each person on this panel has also expressed, that at one point during their academic career, they were working both outside of academia and while they were doing their studies. So I think that you can speak to that a little bit. So the next question that I have, and is starting to get at some of the questions that the panelists or that the participants are posing, is what advice would you give a current graduate student who is looking to go into work outside of academia? And again, I can open it to whoever wants to go first.
I've thought about this question a lot, actually. So
go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, and I see some questions coming up in the Q&A too about, there was a question about academic writing and keeping up academic writing. And I think the biggest piece of advice that I often give to graduate school colleagues that come looking for advice is search your own soul. Like, I cannot emphasize that enough. Determine what you want for yourself and follow that. Along the path of graduate school, there are going to be so many compelling, articulate people who are going to try to convince you to do the things that they think are best for you. And unless you have taken the time to know who you are and what you want and the reasons why you want those things, you will be easily persuaded to go in a million different pathways. So for me, I mean, I really connected to the kind of life that I wanted to build for myself after graduate school. So much to what Judith was saying, I've had two parents that were very ill. One is now passed away. One was one was very ill during my PhD. And I saw like the very essence of life sort of flash before my eyes. And that helped me to really get clear on what I wanted for myself. And I was listening to somebody speak today about how they were on a plane and they read in a book to write your own eulogy. And what do you want to be remembered for as your legacy? And I think that if you can get clear on what your goals are for yourself, the pathway that you will need to determine for yourself out of graduate school and after graduate school will become much more clear, and you will be less persuaded. And then the other thing is also find opportunities to share skills and learn new skills. So you already have a lot of skills within yourself that you've developed from your training up until this point. So where is an opportunity for you to share some of those skills and also develop or grow the skills that you know that you're going to need to create that legacy for yourself on your pathway out of and after graduate school?
Great, thank you, Heather. Anyone else have notes that they would like to add?
Yeah, I mean, it echoes a lot of what I think on this topic too, kind of thinking about getting down to that what your why is when it comes to, let's say, specifically qualitative research. What methodologies do you like? Why do you like them? So say if you're interested in in-depth interviewing, why do you like that? Do you like to engage with people really closely, engage with text really closely, find the story, kind of figure out what are people experiencing, and then figuring out kind of, as I said, the story of what's going on. Getting down to that level and starting there, I think illuminates a lot about what you want your life to look like, what you want to be doing, what's going to engage you. Just thinking in terms of like, what is it you like? How do you want to feel? What kinds of activities? How do you want to use your skills? I think something that I heard once that really stuck with me again is, how do you want to feel? And then kind of going from there, and a lot will kind of sort itself out in terms of where you're going to go with that.
I love that how do you want to feel question, because you know what, that's actually how I decided that market research wasn't for me. It felt too corporate for me. I didn't feel like I fit into a corporate space. For me, I was wanting to figure out, how can I be more in a policy space? And so like, when you think about like research shows up in so many different ways. And like Meghan said, do you like working with people, or do you like, examining texts really closely? Sometimes those are like two really different skills. Do you like managing relationships, or do you like managing spreadsheets, which, like in mixed methods context, that can be a lot of different things. Full disclosure, I'm a single parent, and I finished my PhD as a single parent of 2, and I started at 40. So I'm a little different than some of you. And I pounded a picket line for 5 months while going through some, pretty heavy duty stuff and trying to finish my dissertation and thinking about, what do I want to do? And one of the things that was so amazing was talking to my colleagues on the picket line who were coming from different departments. And so like talking to people from different areas and finding out different things. My PhD supervisor, she kept saying the wrong things to me, but it took me like until my last year to figure out how wrong she was. So only talking to your PhD supervisor or your committee, you might be like really limited. And she would say, oh, because a lot of I did health sociology, I did medical anthropology kind of theorizing in my work. So when I started thinking, she would say things like, oh, you should examine health. But I don't have a public health background. I don't have any staff. And the psych people on the picket line were saying to me, you really should learn SPSS. What's that? I still actually haven't learned it because my agency that I work for doesn't have it yet. So I would recommend trying to get it. And because this question was, what advice would you give to someone? I would have liked to have done more work like exploring knowledge mobilization and program evaluation. And you can do like short courses either through Coursera or like at Ryerson, the Chang School. I didn't know what a logic model was when I started, and I use them quite a bit now. And so those kind of like, and also get good at Microsoft Word and Excel. If you're a Mac person, figure those things out, because they're like, it's like a little slightly different language. And yeah, talk to people outside of your field.
Great, thanks, Judith. It sounds like one of the main take-home messages so far is figure out the type of lifestyle that you want and what resonates with you and the type of life that you want to have post-graduation. And also thinking about the types of skills and techniques and methodologies that are really going to be important when you go on to pursue different career opportunities. Allison, do you have anything else that you would like to add to that?
Sorry, my mouse went stray mouse. No, just underscoring that networking is really important. And to me, I mean, before many years ago, I worked in the film industry, and so networking meant something very different. Usually it involved a glass of wine in your hand, and so I was a little bit afraid of that term until I realized that all of these positions in the downtown east side that I landed either in service provision or in research were all sort of serendipitous or accidental. And then I realized, wait a second, no, it's because of networking. Like, it's because of the social connections that I've made and fostered. And I suppose a little bit of like the reputation that I was careful to protect in terms of being a good worker, shall we say. Yeah, so you know, networking is gold. Networking is your, that's your ticket, so.
Yeah, networking seems to be a thing that keeps coming up, and something that I think that you touched on, and maybe you all have this experience too, is there's this push that from people in academia and people outside that you should be networking, and you sometimes feel really uncomfortable doing it. But the best way that I think about networking is if you feel like if you go into a networking situation thinking I need to network, you're doing it wrong. You should be going in just trying to make friends and be friendly and be a human being. Because how many situations have you been in that's supposed to be this networking thing, and this person comes in and just starts blurbing their expertise and their position to you? And, you know, sometimes that's not always the best way to make an impression or make connections. And honestly, networking is a lot easier and more informal than we make it out to be. So hopefully we get to that conversation to build on that. But this seems to be something that is also coming up is are there any extracurricular activities that graduate students should be aware of when they're thinking about pursuing a qualitative-based work? So were there any volunteer positions that you took on or workshops? This kind of ties into that networking aspect.
One thing that I wished I had had time to do, because volunteering wasn't something I had time to do because I was a mom, and I was also like working in addition to being a TA. I was teaching yoga through my PhD, so I didn't have time to volunteer. But if I did, I would have volunteered for SUPI, my union. I have a very strong interest in labor politics, and there's some really interesting work and in the labor world. And so there were things like on organizing and change management theory, like stuff that you learn working in the union, the labor relations, industrial relations, that I think I really would have liked to have gotten a chance to do more of. Yeah, I mean, I did do some stuff, but not as much as I would have liked.
Thanks. Anybody else care to address that as well? Any volunteering or extracurricular programs that you did in grad school or maybe would have liked to do that you think would help you in the job market?
I can take this question too, Nicole. So I did quite a bit of volunteering during graduate school. And I was actually quite pleased when I looked at the list of participants and I saw a Wish on here and Sarah from the Pathways to Prosperity Student Engagement Committee. So hi. So that was one of the national volunteering opportunities that I did. I was the co-chair of that committee for quite a number of years. And that was a really great, just kind of back to that point around, hi Sarah, around networking is like finding opportunities to do the things that you want to do, right? So kind of back to the point I made earlier about find opportunities to share the skills that you have and to learn new skills. So I went to the Pathways to Prosperity Partnership Conference. I was super amazed at the content that was there. And then I was like, I want to get more involved in this partnership. And that's when I joined the Student Engagement Committee. And that was like a huge, wonderful opportunity for me to meet other graduate students across the country. I also realized very early on in my PhD that I definitely was interested in careers outside of academia and had no interest in becoming an academic. So I never thought about doing a postdoc. I saw a question about that. That was not something that ever crossed my mind. If I didn't want to become an academic, why would I go into a postdoc where I'm going to focus on publishing and becoming an academic? Wasn't for me. So I wanted to learn more about nonprofit organizations. I realized when I came out of my master's and wanted to do work, I had no idea. I really admired the work that nonprofits did, had no idea how they did it, had no idea what it was like. So I joined a board. I became on a board of directors, and I was on a board for like 4 years, 5 years. And that role on the board eventually led to a contract position that led to my full-time employment at Pacific AIDS Network. So for people who are asking about contract employment in the question and answer too, I would say yes, like a contract employment is a way for an employer to test you out before they actually make a commitment. And if you are not great at the role or you're not a fit with the team, then they don't have a human resources concern to have to get rid of you because you're on a contract. So yes, that is a very common way to get in, especially when you don't have dedicated human resources to kind of vet people and to process situations that don't work out in easy ways. That's an easy way to kind of bring somebody on, test the waters, and continue. So I would say, like, kind of that networking thing is finding those opportunities for you to share and to learn. And I can't emphasize that enough, and just the power of your network. And I think if we are sociologists here, like Mark Granovetter, the strength of weak ties was also how I got my next job. I saw somebody working in policy like Judith. I was very interested in that world. So I asked somebody out for coffee who was a former graduate student in our department. And I was like, Miriam, how did you get this job? And then when Miriam left her job, she put my name forward for that job, just simply on the basis of that coffee conversation that we had. So I came from a network, like the idea of networking was sold to me in graduate school, like go to CSA, go to ASA, have a business card, walk around, eat cheese, talk about your research interests. And it was like stressful. It was fun, but it was like also very stressful. And this is not the kind of networking that I do now. Like now I'm looking for opportunities to learn from people and to provide value to people. And I think that those are the two important things. So, like having a network is not like a pie. Like it's not like you have a finite number of connections. And once you give those connections away, there's less pie for you. The more you offer to connect people and be a connector, the more people are going to come to you for connections and to get connected and for you to find new ways to be a connector. So I really can't emphasize that enough.
Thanks, Heather. And I think that you built on that idea of what networking is in a really lovely way. Allison, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Just to say too that it's important to pay it forward, as you hinted at, because sometimes that paying it forward, that it comes around again. And just to add on to what you're talking about, contract work, yeah, sometimes it is an HR issue, and it's sort of an easy way to vet you, but also it's because of the funding structure for so many not-for-profit and other kinds of organizations. So I haven't had a contract that lasts more than a year for a decade now. So yeah, it just seems to be the way that work is. And that's not all necessarily, it's all nonprofit and some academic adjacent work, but I'm sure it's also in other areas as well. Maybe Meghan, you could speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not uncommon within kind of the market research world as well to have sort of these first 6-month contract and then reassessing after that. And, jumping back on the idea of networking, something that I think I wish I had done a little bit more of when I was in school was getting to know other people in other departments, other social scientific fields, but even just in economics or psychology. A lot of my colleagues are organizational and industrial psychologists. So learning from them has been fantastic. And I think if I had sort of got to know, networked with, or gotten engaged with other fields while focusing on my sociological education, I think it would have expanded my understanding of what was possible for me after graduation, and helped me learn from so many different perspectives, so many different approaches to research and to research questions and looking at the ways that it's done and how to think about it. So I think networking more expansively in terms of topic area would be super helpful too.
Great, thank you. That was all really helpful information. So The next question, I want to focus on maybe beefing up some of our participants' egos a little bit, or their confidence in themselves, because one thing that I think that a lot of grads maybe are feeling is insecure about their prospects on the job market. So what are some qualitative job market related skills that you think that students probably already have, but they might not be aware of them? Go ahead.
So, I spent a lot of time thinking about that when I was in that kind of resume building phase and networking phase. And just to say one other thing about networking is I thought of my networking meetings, my little coffee chats, and some of them were online, and some of them that I offer now to other people are online, of course, is to listen to them and their story. I like to do. And so when I think about what those skills are, relationship building, stakeholder relationships, research management, project management. Now, project management is a bit of a tricky one, especially like in some corporate fields, because there's like this PMP certification thing that I don't know what it is, but it's really big and really technical, and it tends to show up in the IT world a lot. And I don't think we need to do that, but we are project managers. And, we PhD people, we're managing so many different pieces. And so you're already good at that. You're already really awesome at managing being a TA, managing volunteer work, managing extra employment, managing your writing, managing writing 5 different chapters all at once or whatever, however your methods are, navigating a family, taking care of parents, all of those pieces. So project management, put that on your list of skills. Also research ethics. I actually manage, I'm a research manager in my job as well. Like, we're developing research ethics policy. And so that's something that for me, I suppose that's what, that academic adjacent kind of world. But yeah, so those 3, I mean, the writing, of course, you're going to be excellent writers and editors and, attention to detail, that might be you. And so, think of those things that you love doing, and you can capitalize them and put that into, on the top of your resume, that section, that little profile piece about who you are, and pick all the ones that you really resonate with, that you can speak to, that if you're applying to a specific job, the job asks for too. You're so good at playing with words. Oh, and the other one, translating knowledge, we can absorb huge amounts of text in a short period of time. And my colleagues are often amazed at how fast I process information. So that we PhD people are good at that. We forget that we are.
Great. Anybody else have anything else to add?
Yeah. Oh, Heather, you were going to go. Okay. I think it's all of those things. I think it's, being able to take large volumes of information, like Judith mentioned, and the experiences of others, and figuring out the best way to convey that to a larger audience, to stakeholders, to policymakers, to the people who want to know how to improve the situations of the people who are going through challenges, or, finding out what the key issues are from people's own words. And one of the things that's really important in my work that I think, qualitative sociologists are super, being able to synthesize those perspectives without losing that integrity of the individual respondent. So paying attention to, how that person is experiencing their situation in their life in sort of that macro level, to say, okay, well, what does that look like? What's the context? What are the factors at play? But also, what is this one person telling me? And how do I engage with that person and understand their stories and ask questions if I need to? So it's all of those kind of public facing things that you can really play up when you're applying for work to say, you know, it's the relationship building. It's that I really can listen to people and understand what they're going through and maybe figure out kind of what that means. But yeah, everything Judith said, like, you'd be fantastic writers, editors, finding out that big picture idea. You know, it seems like a lot of employment in a lot of industry settings, they're looking for the big picture idea. Like, they're looking for what's really going on. How do we distill this? And so being able to do that and say that you can really effectively do that, I think, is a really good way to market yourself.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan. Heather, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, really strong process thinking skills, which I think, having been in the workforce now for like 5 years, process thinking is a serious skill. And it kind of gets at what Judith was saying about the project management. You have found your way out of so many holes, like deep dug down in the ground holes already, of like, I have a research question. What are the methods? Who do I talk to? How do I write it up? How do I find information? Who do I need? Like, how do I apply for graduation? So just like the process thinking of like moving through all those different steps is really great problem solving skills. And I think that also helps with thematic analysis. So I think beefing up your skills with what Judith was recommending with program evaluations and learning how to do logic models, like logic models stump so many people, but if you have strong process thinking, which you do because of all the work that you do, a logic model I don't think is as complicated for sociology graduates as it might be for other people, but it like stumps people and it takes a long time for many people to do them. But I feel like if you have that really strong process thinking and you know the questions to ask to get the answers that you need, a logic model is going to be very quick for you to put together. And then, yeah, I think the thematic analysis and being able to do crosstabs really fast and like distill information like Megan is saying, and then present it really quickly in like a very basic kind of like format is going to be very wow. It's going to have a wow factor for a lot of people. And then this is kind of a unique one that's not really my own experience, but I've seen one of the people who's currently in the master's program is moonlighting doing social media marketing as a sociologist, because exactly what it takes to get the message to sell the product that the person is interested in doing. And so she just has an awareness of like the structures of society and like kind of can identify trends really quickly and distill that information in really compelling formats. It also helps that she's quite a talented photographer, but I think that there's a lot of talent there for sociologists as well for kind of like a side hustle.
Allison, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to that?
No, I'm just really looking forward to getting all these skills.
I'm sure that you already have a lot of them.
Yeah, but not all.
Okay, so we have one more question before we continue on to answer some of the Q&As that all of our participants have so eagerly put on the question board and the chat forum. So the last question is, where was a good place, and I know this is pretty general, but where would be a really great place for people who are thinking of transitioning into non-academic work to look for jobs? Because, man, job market is not great right now, but are there any areas that we might not have been thinking about?
I mean, I don't want to say Indeed and Career Beacon because everyone knows about those, but I mean, going through avenues of cold emailing organizations that you're interested in, it's that networking piece, cold emailing people to say, hey, I'm really interested in what you're doing. Do you have time to talk to me about it? And just not giving up. I know it's tough, being persistent. I think exploring, as I said, organizations that you're interested in and going down the rabbit hole of, okay, well, if it's not this one, what area do they work in? So being a little bit creative, I think, about where your search ends up rather than a specific website or a specific place to look for postings, say.
Great. Does anybody else have any additional avenues that you might want to pursue, Judith?
So I know that this is maybe a bit of a contestable topic, but LinkedIn has offered me some really interesting opportunities. I know my organization actually posts a lot of its jobs on LinkedIn. The thing about LinkedIn that's kind of interesting is you can put in this like job search criterion under, qualitative research, and lots of things come up. And because you guys are all, you folks are all really good researchers, so you can actually use LinkedIn as a research tool. So it can be a little bit of a rabbit hole, but you like find one thing and then you're like, what does that lead to? And then you like research that company and then you find out a little bit more. Or an agency, for example. If in Toronto, we have policyjobs.to if you're interested in policy work. And so like a lot of the jobs like with the city of Toronto, and I'm sure other like larger municipalities have similar type networking things. And also like institutes, like, and that is again, that's sort of like research, academic adjacent, but like different policy think tanks. And then like, if you're looking in the marketing world, market research world, there's different like market research shops, they sometimes call them. There's some really interesting ones. So those are a few ways. Also, if you take courses, I'm sorry, I'm so Ontario, Toronto based, but the Chang School at Ryerson, if you were to take one of those kinds of certificate programs, there's one in publishing, by the way. And so, like if you did the publishing certificate, or like if you're interested in labor relationships, like an HR certificate, they connect you to different spaces, like corporate spaces. And so a lot of the times you can find really interesting areas that you didn't think of through networking interviews, where you hear people's stories and then you learn more and more. So it can be a really interesting little rabbit hole. Like check out someone that you like and then look to see if they have a blog, and then you can have fun with it.
I really like the idea of having fun with the job search. I think that takes a little bit of stress out of it. Heather, did you have something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, so I think all of these are great suggestions. And just kind of picking up on that idea, informational interviews, I think, are like the most under-recognized opportunity for finding jobs. I think, and so if you don't know what an informational interview is, spend some time, do a Google search, figure that out. And then I think, I would say this might sound cheesy, but where are the people that you admire and whose work you would like to be doing? Where are they working? And, what are they doing? How did they get that work? Just kind of like what Judith was alluding to. And, and pick up the keyboard and send them an email and ask them like, hey, do you have 5, 10, 15, let's be honest, it's probably going to be 30 minutes to chat about how you got to the role that you are at. And just really like come prepared with those questions that so an informational interview is basically like reverse questioning. You actually ask them like, how did you get to this job? What, all those kinds of questions, and take that opportunity to talk to them and to kind of position yourself in their mind as somebody who might be a person to work with. And I guess the power dynamic of an informational interview is you're actually coming to them and asking them questions. So you're kind of setting yourself up to get a job before you're actually looking for a job. And then in the future, they'll maybe keep you in mind when opportunities cross their desk. And so, another thing is look at people who have recently graduated from the PhD program that you're currently in. Where are they working? Reach out to them, do a similar thing, let them know you're looking. I am always like super happy to forward on role opportunities that come across my desk to people that I work with and that I can vouch for their skills, people that I've been in graduate school with. And I guess the thing is that it can be hard to do those things, but it's easier to do those things when you're not actually looking for a job in the immediate future. So if you're kind of putting those feelers out there early on in your program, You're going to be well set up to have lots of things coming to you throughout, and you're going to get a feel for the kind of work that's out there and the kind of things that you could maybe see yourself doing. And I guess the thing I just want to say is when I defended my PhD, I had like nothing lined up. I was absolutely terrified. But now I can say that if you kind of take that initiative to do those things, there are so many opportunities out there. They might be short-term opportunities, but they will likely lead to longer-term opportunities if you are reliable, you deliver things quickly, and you can be a person that people enjoy working with. So if you actually hold up your end of the bargain, I think that all of those little opportunities will often lead to bigger opportunities.
I think that's some really great advice. And the big thing about informational interviews is I've always found that people are usually pretty eager to do it because people sometimes like talking about themselves, and it's pretty low prep on their behalf. So it's a really good way for you to learn about a company or a corporation or an organization, and also learn about the steps that you might want to be taking early on, as Heather said, that will help you later on. That's awesome information. Allison, go ahead.
Also, we tend to forget what it's like for people on the hiring side of the equation. And I certainly haven't hired at like this level, but I've certainly hired as a coordinator of various studies and other places. I've hired people, and it's really hard to find good people. And so those informational interviews are beneficial to the hirer as well, because now they have you in their Rolodex, if that word still means anything. And so now they know that there's somebody out there that might not be a good fit for anything that's coming up now, but you can keep them in mind for future. And so don't underestimate the value that you could bring to them as well during that time. It's not taking 30 minutes of their time, it's also giving of yourself. So remember your own value.
Great, thank you everyone. Okay, so now what we're going to do is switch over to some of the questions that some of our participants have posted. So I'm going to switch back and forth between the Q&A and some of the chat that you've posted on the side here. So the first question that got a lot of thumbs up in the Q&A section is, as a new graduate, do you find that when you're in the when you're going through some job searches, that there's an overabundance of contract work rather than salary positions? And how do you think we should navigate some of those? I see a lot of nodding of heads.
We're all aggressively
Oh yeah,
nodding.
Megan, if you'd like to go first, and then Judith.
Yeah, we're all sitting here like, yes. I mean, I think it's a bit of reality to deal with, that there is a lot of that contract work that we've already talked about. You know, it's the way to kind of get your foot in the door. And maybe if, you know, they don't have the funding to keep you on, they might know other people who do. So not necessarily being afraid to go for those opportunities, because like we said, they do lead into really good places.
I totally agree with what Megan is saying about contract work. Don't be scared of it. You know, it's funny, like our parents' generation were a generation of people that could, you know, graduate from school, and those were back in the days when an undergraduate degree held enough currency, and you know, they'd be in their job for 25 or 30 years and then they could retire, and that's just not the reality anymore. But you can make contract work for you too. You know, I'm trying you guys out as much as you're trying me out, and the opportunity to make connections while you're in that role and learn things in a way that it's like, yeah, you know what, this is 6 months, I can try it out and I can learn how to do some really good things and make more connections and develop more relationships and find out, oh, I actually don't like this, or I really do. And I'm actually in a contract that was first 3 months, then extended to a year, and tomorrow is my 1-year anniversary, and I know that my contract's being extended. And because it's a nonprofit, I know that they tell me that they would like to hire me permanent. It's a funding juggle, and so it's knowing that you're developing the skills and you're developing the relationships. You can try it out, and I think it is good.
Great. Heather, did you have anything to add? I noticed you were strongly nodding your head.
Yes, like I was on a call earlier today with somebody in an organization who's interested in finding somebody to do a contract, and they were coming to find somebody that possibly we could refer to that contract. So I think a lot of the work is contract based, and it's great. You get a deliverable at the end of it that then, you know, if they give you permission, you might be able to share that as something in your portfolio. I think one of the big challenges even I feel like I still face this on the job market, is the PhD. People feel like it can be somebody who's not going to deliver on deadline, somebody who's going to always want their deadlines extended, somebody who's going to ask a lot of questions, who's going to think they're smarter than everybody else on the team, think they're better than everybody else on the team, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of negative stereotypes that go along with having an advanced degree. And so I think that the contract also gives an opportunity for them to test that out, and for you to dispel some of those myths in the way that you work with those organizations as well.
That's great. Allison, did you have anything that you wanted to add, or?
I glitched, so I missed a bit of what Heather was saying, but I think I already talked a little bit about contract work and how it's just been a fact of my personal life for the last decade or so. So I'm not afraid of it in the same way that, say, my mother would be. Yeah, because that's just the way that they have to structure it for funding reasons and other reasons as well. So take them. And like worst case scenario is that you don't like it, and you get some connections there, or you love it and you still get connections there and you have to move on to something else. But yeah, it's always an opportunity for something.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like that contract work is now a fact of life, and that we should eagerly be jumping into those opportunities, not just for employment, but also for the networking and the advantages that will come with it. I'm going to try to combine two questions, one from the chat and one from the Q&A section. So this one is a shout out to Judith. Hi, Judith. I love the idea of post-PhD networking groups. Are there any groups that you would recommend to recent PhD grads, or where they are more informal? P.S. Huge thanks to all the panelists and organizers. This is wonderful. Thank you. We're so glad that you could join us. I would also like to sort of smoosh on one of the chat questions, which is, what are some networking opportunities that we could maybe also be thinking about during COVID? Because networking from your living room, which is mine, is sometimes a little challenging.
So I get to shout out to Jennifer Polk right now, who I know is here. So Jennifer had a fabulous networking group, and she's doing right now called From PhD to Life. And she started that group, I think, actually after or right around the time that I found my current role. So I haven't really spent too much time in that space, but there was another group that Jennifer had been organizing with as well. And I learned a lot about people in my LinkedIn network, really expanded. And feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn if you want to find me. You know, I love making new friends, and I had a lot of folks do little coffee chats with me, and you can do them online. And it's true. I think, as Heather said, you know, informational interviews, like, it's fun to pay it forward to someone and help kind of tell your story in hopes that it might help someone else. And so LinkedIn can be really cool, and you can use LinkedIn as a networking group strategy. The other thing that I did, and that some of my friends are doing, is they have little scrums. So they encourage each other at the beginning of the day. They might meet again at noon. They might meet again at 5, or have like a combination of those options. And folks get together online on Zoom, and, you know, so what are you working on today? And so you kind of give each other a pep talk, sort of like when you're working on your dissertation and you might have a writing group. And actually, so some of the people from my writing group, when I was working on my dissertation, we still keep in touch, and we've, you know, kind of been each other's little cheerleaders and done things together. So kind of think about that writing group that you have or that you were thinking about joining, because there's lots of them. There's a Facebook group or 2 or 3 on kind of alt ac, qualitative research, sociology type groups. I wish I could think of it right now. I forget. I'm so sorry. But again, you can hit me up on LinkedIn and ask me. But there are some great groups on Facebook as well that you can connect to and have conversations with. Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have any other options that they can think of? If not, we'll just carry on to the next question. We've got a few to get through. So I'm going to also acknowledge that we're not likely going to get through all of them, but if you would like, you can email your questions to me and I can forward them on. The next question is, it sounds like Judith is doing some academic writing on the weekends. Is it hard to keep that side of things going while you're maybe doing work outside of academia? So maybe some of us that want to transition into work outside of academia kind of have some publications that they've been working on through, and you'd like to see them go to fruition at the end. Is it hard to balance those 2 roles?
So the book chapter that is actually going to press this, like I think it's coming out in July. I started writing that 3 years ago. And my co-author and I have actually shopped it around for a long time. So the fact that it's finally coming together and we're just like on the weekend, I was just finishing up some revisions. It's been accepted to the Journal of Feminist Scholarship. Oh, sorry, I mentioned a book chapter and then I mentioned an article. So 2 different things. They've both taken a really long time. And so they're long deadlines, you know, they're kind of like, you peck away at it. But if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. I mean, I just do it because my identity likes to write and read, and I haven't quite let go. And, you know, that I just kind of haven't decided. And like, I don't think I want to turn my dissertation into a book, but I know that there's still a lot of interest on the topic. And so some days though, like there've been moments where I'm like, oh, the last thing I want to do is look at that article again. I'm so tired from working full time. So you really have to kind of decide like how much you want to do it and why. You know, it's because it's like free labor. Like I might get a tiny little bit of royalties on the textbook that I got the chapter in, but it's mostly just because I like it. It's a line on a CV that's not really going to do much for me. So I'm not doing it because it's going to get me further in my career. I don't think. But at the same time, as an educator, and like I still feel a kind of, I don't know, maybe it's an emotional attachment. It's still work I need to figure out why I'm even doing it. But it can be really nice to just kind of hold on to a part of you, like a hobby.
I love the idea of academic writing being a hobby. Anyone else trying to sort of balance that, still holding on to that academic writing on the side, or have you all let it go?
I have not done any of it, but I will say the people that I know who continue to work full time and also publish, it's a passion project. And I think that would be the key in kind of keeping that momentum going. The people that I know who are doing that, they love what they're working on. And I think that would make all the difference.
Great. I have another question that didn't get a lot of upvotes, but I actually think it's a really important question that I've heard echoed around in grad school is there hope for master's students going out without pursuing a PhD into the job market? And so maybe Allison and Megan, you can speak to this a little bit.
There definitely is. There absolutely is. I mean, I think the skills are there. I think, you know, going out into the world and gaining experience that way is always available to you. And going back to do a PhD is always available too. I think, you know, being confident in that and being, you know, you got through a graduate program, you have those skills, you're extremely capable, people are going to want you. Yeah, there's totally hope. It's completely doable.
Allison, what do you think?
Yeah, I might even go further and say that perhaps masters, there's more value gained, like the net benefit, leaving with a master's degree rather than sticking around for another 5 years or however long it's going to take to get a PhD. Like, it almost, spoken like a PhD student, it almost feels like at this point, maybe I'm narrowing my possibility, but that you should take what I say with a grain of salt, because I don't really know what I'm talking about. But there's definitely that argument to be made that if you leave with a master's degree, you spend a year or 2 years doing it, you leave with a lot of skills and a lot of experience and a lot of connections, like all the things that we've been talking about up to this point. And you're almost more hireable because you haven't sort of overeducated yourself for all the positions in a way. I hope this makes sense. And I'm not making people doubt, except for myself, their choice to continue and do a PhD. But
it makes a lot of sense, because I think some people look at the PhD and the PhD can be deceptive. They say 4 years. Some of us took longer. I took 7. And so there's a serious cost benefit in that you're willing to invest that much time and that much money, let's be honest, goes into that process. So if you are concerned with or have outside influences that mean that you want to get into the job market sooner, I think that it's really reasonable to have confidence in yourself and confidence in your abilities after your master's program. I think that this is maybe what both of you are getting at, is that we maybe downplay the skills that master's graduates have.
Yeah, and just to add one final point on that, I think if you know that you want to pursue careers outside of academia, you can take that and use it to gain the workplace experience that you will need to enter into those roles. And that's, you know, what a lot of employers will be looking for.
Great. And Judith, you just had your hand up?
Yeah, I was going to say that there's a few people from my master's cohort who are in very cool jobs now. One of them is doing like community-based education engagement work. Another one is, she was working in provincial government, and now she's doing more nonprofit work, also in the Indigenous space, and another person working in the CBC. There's a few people from my PhD program who dropped their PhDs and were doing really cool work as well. So, and there was a point when I thought I was going to drop my PhD, and then I didn't. I interviewed for a very cool job, and they told me that I didn't have on-the-ground policy experience. And so, you know, like, what if I had dropped my PhD and done the certificate in public policy? You know, that might have been another thing. So, and actually, I talked to a guy at the Chang School in that program, in the policy program, and he was like, yeah, the master's people, they're the ones who are going to get the jobs, because the PhD people are, you know, they're overeducated. I don't go for that. I don't think that's true at all. But the program that he's directing, you know, like, it's kind of, you can totally just do your master's and get a very wonderful job, because it's really like super specific, and you're going to be great.
Thanks for that. One last question before we have to tie everything up. So we talked about different skills, but is there a course that you think, or a couple courses that you think would really help students, especially if they want to do masters or if they do the PhD, that will help them when they go out into the job market after?
Can I?
Yeah, go for it, Heather.
I would say no. I would say that there's 67 different people on this call with 67 different exciting career paths ahead of them. So I think it would be a grand overstatement of my experience and knowledge to recommend one thing for them to think about. But I think thinking back to some of those points you made earlier about finding what your why is, how you want to feel, who do you admire that's doing that work, what paths did they take? But I will say that I think getting some experience on program evaluation so you can do some of those short-term contracts and understand like how to do a project quickly would be helpful.
Anyone else with ideas about coursework or sort of programs that would be really helpful? I think Heather summed it up really nicely. It's really dependent on what avenue that you want to pursue after graduation. So if you want to do analytics or anything like that, maybe beefing up your methods. There's also, I don't want to underplay any of the other coursework that might be available to you, and thinking about some of the certificate programs that are also available to you postgraduate that'll really hone some of those skills that would make you a better fit in the job market. So I think that this is a really good point, is that we maybe underplay some of the courses that are available and how well they already do link up to the job market. So we're just about ready to sum everything up, and I'd like to take this opportunity to go around to all the panelists. Thinking back, this is a little bit of a, I don't know if anybody watches RuPaul's Drag Race, but they take a moment where they ask each person to go around and say, what advice would you give graduate school you who's wanting to go out into the job market? So what would you give previous you as sort of inspiration? Maybe you're telling yourself, you know, you hang in there, you got it, or just like what you wish you had known back then. So what do you wish you had known? I'll start with Meghan.
Aside from, I think, what a lot of people would be thinking in terms of, you can do it, you're stronger than you think. I think don't doubt how adaptable you can be. Don't doubt how quick you can think, how, you know, you get to that, is it the pyramid of knowledge, where you get to the top where you can sort of reproduce knowledge and create new knowledge. Don't doubt what a value that is to you as a person and your ability to thrive in your career. You know, to be, you know, through my work, I touch a lot of different areas, and I think I owe that to the ability to move to those different areas, to look at different industries, to what I gained in grad school, thinking laterally. The same core skills can apply in a lot of different areas. So don't doubt how well you can move into those spaces and what you really bring to the table as a researcher, which I think, you know, everybody here can agree with and hopefully identify with, because I'm sure, you know, it's you bring something really special to the table. And, you know, going through grad school is also hard. It's very hard. So having that tenacity too, to say, oh, I'm tough, I can do it. You know what I mean? It's remembering those things about yourself when things are tough or a little bit uncertain.
Thank you, Meghan. Heather, what would you say to past you?
I would say don't be so scared. Like, I was so scared that there's going to be nothing for me afterwards. And then I feel like there's been way more than I ever could have anticipated or dreamed of. So many opportunities are out there for you to do something that's meaningful to you, that will make a difference to you and make a difference to others. Find that thing that makes you tick and chase it. Find out how to do it. There was one other piece of advice that now I kept remembering, but now I can't remember. Can you come back to me, please? Sorry.
I can come back to you, that's no problem. Judith, what would you say to previous you?
Give yourself permission to let go of imposter syndrome. You are enough.
Mm-hmm.
You are enough, and you are versatile, and give yourself lots of time to look for the opportunities. 6 to 12 months, I applied to 80 things. It takes a long time. And be gentle with yourself.
I think that's great advice for anybody in grad school. Allison?
Well, I can speak to master's graduate Allison as opposed to I mean it's still sort of a retroactive communication, I suppose. Yeah, the imposter syndrome is huge. I think that I mean, I even said it coming onto this panel that I'm an interloper. So it's so much a part of how we frame ourselves, I think. And because we're in that little bubble, right? Like we're guided along through the process, and having to burst out of that bubble and now make your own path and think for yourself and set your own agenda. That's something that's terrifying. Yeah, but stick with it. Keep going. I've got nothing to add. I'm hoping Heather has her jewel ready at this point.
Heather, do you have it ready?
Yeah, I do. I don't know if it's a jewel for anybody else, but it was a jewel for me. It's like take you down a little memory lane of like the wild ways in which my mind worked when I was a graduate student. I had this like super weird impression that if I chose to do one thing, that was the only door that would open, and then all the other doors would be closed. Like I remember like sitting at a pho restaurant, eating noodle soup, thinking if I accepted this one opportunity to do this like immigration related student project, that then I would never get to go and work with like this. Like I was also involved in HIV stuff at that time. And I was like, if I go into immigration, that's it. That door will close for me forever. And like, that is absolutely untrue and not at all factually accurate. And I continue to span like many different worlds in my career. Like life doesn't work like that. So whatever you choose to do today doesn't close many other doors for you in the future. If anything, it may open doors you could have never imagined. So, and then I guess the other thing I want to say too is I remember walking out of panels like this, feeling very overwhelmed at all the to-dos that people told me I had to do and feeling like I had to execute them that moment. That led to a lot of unpleasant situations for me, like in bathrooms in the Ansel building, being like, how am I going to do all these things? You don't have to do all the things now. There are like some suggestions of things that have worked for me and other people on this panel. You may have different things, but what you are doing is great. And I think what you are doing is going to prepare you for the future world. I think that is going to have more remote working. One thing I've really realized during COVID is that I'm used to working at home by myself for 8 hours a day. And many other people on my team were not equipped to do that. And so my work has kind of continued, whereas like, not to say that my colleagues' work hasn't continued, but it hasn't been as much of a struggle for me. So I think also, even though we've given you a lot of things that you could consider doing, also recognize that the things you're already doing are already setting you up to be successful. And so it's not so much that there's going to be other things for you to do, but you're already doing all of the things.
Great, thank you everyone. So thank you very, very much for taking part in this panel today. This was a really great discussion, and I think that we had a lot of really great and insightful comments. I also want to thank our audience members for attending and for sharing your questions as well. We'll be sending it back around a feedback survey to all our audience members, and we would very greatly appreciate it if you could fill it out. In addition to that, this webinar will be posted on YouTube, so you can go back and you can watch it again if there's any information that you missed. And we will also be making some graphics that we will be posting on our Twitter page for some of the information that our panelists shared to make it a bit more easy for you. But again, thank you all for joining us, and we hope you found this series helpful, and we look forward to chatting with you again in the future. Bye, everyone.